Topic one for this week. I want to start with UFC Fight Night 222, where Sergei Pavlovich made history in the main event, recording his 6th consecutive first-round knockout, something that's never been done before in modern UFC history, defeating fellow contender Curtis Blaydes in the main event at the UFC Apex. Pavlovich said afterwards that he wants to wait for the winner of Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, which we expect to happen probably in November in New York. But that could be a long wait for him, guys. He's certainly earned the right to sit out, given what he's done in this division so far. I can't really poke too many holes in this resume, but I guess first off, I want you to give me your takeaways from his performance and maybe give me some early handicaps on a potential fight between Pavlovich and Jones, or maybe Miocic, if that's the way it goes. Danny, open things up for us this week.
Yeah, so it looks like he's okay with waiting, even though that title fight is expected, as you said, towards the end of the year. So it looks like we're going to get hibernating Pavlovich here, because he's going to eat and rest and go somewhere back in Russia and just show up whenever sort of the title picture is resolved here at heavyweight, which may be a very, very long time. But look, this guy is clearly a threat, clearly a dangerous fighter. I said post-fight that he probably is giving right now Ngannou a run for who's got the most power, in the sport, period. I mean, I can't think of somebody else outside of those two of who put the label on who the most powerful striker is in the sport. I mean, what he's been able to do, just knockout after knockout, first round finish after first round finish, is just unbelievable. I mean, the guy is just extremely talented. I do want to see what he looks like in the second, third round, but it looks like we're going to have to wait for that. Clearly, I think the most deserving guy right now to fight for the belt, but I know obviously politics, there's a bigger fight ahead with Stipe Miocic and Jon Jones. Jon Jones won Stipe Miocic specifically, but in my eyes, Sergei Pavlovich is the most dangerous guy in the heavyweight division right now for the champion, Jon Jones.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly there, right, Danny? Politics, that's what it comes down to. I mean, Stipe Miocic, we know what he's done in the sport, but as we talk about so often on the show, it's not a meritocracy. And if it was, we would be getting a fight involving Sergei Pavlovich next for the title. But before we get too deep into that conversation, I guess, give me your thoughts on what we saw in the main event at the Apex, and how impressed are you with Pavlovich in this run he's been on? It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, very, very impressed. I mean, he dominated Curtis Blaydes, and we don't see that that often. Him fighting off that takedown from Curtis Blaydes was just amazing. It was like he shot on a oak tree or something. He just bounced right off. Like, he actually got to him. He just didn't move. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And I mean, we see strategy of waiting around for fighters and fights. It doesn't usually work out, but I think in this particular instance, it might be his only play. 6 straight wins in the division, that's no joke. I don't know if you want to risk that. Take time on concentrating on just getting better. A lot of fighters at this high level towards the top, towards the title shot, don't have that luxury. They're usually training for one guy and then training for the next guy and training. He actually has the opportunity to maybe take some time and pick up some new skills, make himself better. But it's really hard to get these type of streaks, man. And for him to do this in the heavyweight division, I think is really, really impressive. And if you're going to handicap a little bit, I hate to pick against Jon Jones, but boy, does this guy show a lot of things that might give Jon Jones some trouble.
Yeah, it's I mean, the power is just terrifying. Like, we have only seen a knockout streak like this once before, and it was Chuck Liddell back in his prime when he had 7 knockouts in a row, but many of them weren't in the first round either. So if Pavlovich, goes out there and his title fight is next, and he knocks the guy out to tie the UFC knockout streak record, and then maybe a title defense to set himself apart, he's got a real opportunity to do something special here. George, just maybe give some context to what you see out of Sergei Pavlovich. Does he stand out as kind of a unique heavyweight from what you've seen compared to all the other terrifying heavyweights over the years?
For sure. This guy is, so he's established that he's a hard hitter, right? And along the way, we wanted to get more questions answered. Well, how would he do against the cream of the crop? And he put away Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa, like the others as well. First round. Well, how would he do against the wrestler? That was supposed to be the big test, and he passed. Now, granted, there was the one takedown that did come, and I rewatched the fight, just before the show started. Curtis, he's going to get dumped on because obviously, hey, why didn't you use your wrestling? I would say this. There was a couple of times where Curtis landed some nice strikes, and we all said that Curtis Blaydes' striking is probably more formidable than Sergei Pavlovich's grappling, although we've got to really see it. And he hit him a couple of times and kind of got a respect back, right? But only for a few seconds. Sergei Pavlovich keeps coming back. That guy's a savage. He wasn't scared of the power. He had tasted some of it. They were clean shots. But it was at that time, I think, that Curtis Blaydes should have followed up with the wrestling. Anytime you bring it up to a wrestler, hey, man, you've fallen in love with your hands, they say, well, I need the strikes to set up my wrestling. He landed the strikes. He had set up opportunities for the wrestling. He resorted to the wrestling once he was already hurt, once Pavlovich didn't respect the hands. And so that was the problem. Like, look, Blaydes is a top 5 guy, and he has been for a long time, so we can't completely dismiss him as just a bum or anything like that. But this was all Pavlovich. We still don't know how he'll do on the ground against Jon Jones. That's the big question, because he hasn't allowed us the answer, because he's just a Terminator. He ends things, everything so quickly.
Yeah, I guess the only evidence we really have is the fight with Alistair Overeem in his UFC debut. And we, have heard Pavlovich talk a little bit about that. I know he addressed it on media day, and he basically said that fight didn't have the full camp, traveled over to, I believe that fight was in China, and he didn't have the right time to acclimate and stuff. So he said he would never make that mistake again. And the fact that he went 2 weeks early from Florida, where he was training, to Las Vegas shows that he has taken that kind of stuff pretty seriously. So lesson learned, I guess, for him. But I'll stick with you, George. I mean, was Pavlovich impressive enough that maybe the UFC offices, Dana White, Hunter Campbell, Mick Maynard, they go into their matchmaker meeting tomorrow? Do they say, hey, this guy was so impressive, Jones and Miocic don't want to do this until November? Maybe we could call Jon Jones and see if he wants to fight a bit earlier, and Stipe is available, at any point. Do you think there's any way this forces them to reconsider the calculation of what they're doing with the heavyweight title here?
It at least needs to be brought up. Will a change be made? Well, I don't know. I don't know if a change will be made, but it at least needs to be talked about, because that guy made an impression on fans, on media, on other fighters. Pay attention to your audience. Yes, I know it's all about selling pay-per-views and things like that, and I realize we have GOAT versus GOAT. We don't want to mess that up. But Jesus, these guys, Jon Jones and Miocic, have been gone away for so long. They haven't been too worried about GOAT versus GOAT or these possibilities for the last 3 years, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to sit around and go, man, I wonder who's the GOAT. We got a hot ticket right here in Sergei Pavlovich. I don't want to wait till November. November means that whoever comes out of that, if they're healthy, remember, these guys don't fight very often. The soonest we could get a fight is February, March, April. We're in April. I'm supposed to get excited about a potential fight a year away? No. I'm sorry. You're not even filling out the August and September dance cards yet. You're on July, 290 set. I get it. But, man, these guys have had quick results in fights. I go with the hot ticket. I get these big guys in there soon, man. Pavlovich versus Jones, and then the winner, he can get, I guess, Stipe Miocic or whatever. But I go with the hot ticket. Dana White said it himself. If you wait around, things happen. Hey, apply the same logic to your matchmaking.
What do you think, Danny? I mean, it's tricky, right? Because if you're Pavlovich, I know he got asked about it. He's like, I don't care who I fight. They're both big tests, but this could be a pretty grim situation. So let's say in this scenario, Stipe Miocic actually beats Jon Jones. They're doing a rematch of that right away, right? Which puts the timeline even further. And then we also have Jon Jones saying if he beats Stipe, he might be retiring. He's hinted this could be his final fight. So Sergei Pavlovich, could be a long way out. Maybe if he does fight for a title, it could be a vacant title. God knows who it'd be by that point. It could be very complicated for him. So, if you're in his spot, do you try to make some more noise, Danny, and be like, no, give me my shot now. I'm not waiting for these two older guys to figure it out? Or what's kind of the play here? Do you think there's any way UFC reconsiders things?
Hashtag hibernating Pavlovich. That's what it's going to come down to. He's going to have to sit back and look how this thing plays out. But this is such a weird situation because, yes, ideally, merit-wise, you can't make a case for Stipe Miocic. The guy hasn't fought in forever. Pavlovich is on a historic run right now. But again, it comes down to politics. I do think Pavlovich is going to have to fight again. Let's be real here. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I am with George. I agree with his take. Ideally, that's what I'd like to see. But look, we saw the UFC have no problem when the whole Francis Ngannou situation was happening. They had no problem to wait an entire year until, or actually more than a year, until the heavyweight belt was defended once again. So being Jon Jones in the last of his career, having one or maybe two more fights left, being a huge pay-per-view draw, literally a historic figure, they're just going to roll out the red carpet and really just do whatever he wants. So if they're able to work out something with Stipe by the end of the year, that's what's going to happen. And unfortunately, I think Pavlovich is going to fight again. He can make all the interviews that he wants. He can learn how to speak English. He can do this. He can do that. Look, if a 6-fight first round knockout streak doesn't get you excited, I'm sorry, but an interview, a promo won't. So I think he's just going to have to fight again if we're being real here.
Interesting. Goes, I guess, put a bow on that. If he does have to fight again, who do you think it would be? And I guess if you're in Jon Jones's shoes and you're looking at Pavlovich come up the ranks here, does this maybe make you even feel warmer about that possible retirement route? Be like, hey, I can come in here, capture the title, beat the heavyweight goat, and then dip, and I don't even have to deal with a man like Sergei Pavlovich, and my legacy isn't going to be affected by not fighting him.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it probably wouldn't be, because just the fact that he went up and did that is such a big deal. I don't know if the UFC want to risk Pavlovich against someone else. But, you know, you mentioned that room with Dana White, Hunter Campbell, the matchmakers. When they're picking up the phone, they're calling Stipe Miocic. He's been notoriously kind of difficult to negotiate with. I don't know that he's as difficult now after seeing that performance, right? Because really, if I'm Pavlovich, one thing I'm throwing out there is look at Stipe's last 8 fights. They've come against guys who have either been either retired or no longer with the UFC, right? Ngannou, Cormier, JDS, Overeem, Verdum. All these new fans that come to the sport are kind of, we're basing this all off of the guy was a great heavyweight champion, but Pavlovich's resume is to date. You're looking at killers that are fighting right now. If you look at Stipe Miocic's record, I think there's only one guy that's still fighting in the UFC, and that's Alistair Overeem, right? I pound that. I pound on the UFC's front door and I say, let me in. I deserve this shot.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, this isn't, I guess, exactly rare. Look at Henry Cejudo, right? He's coming back after a 3-year layoff, and he's getting a title shot too. And Jon Jones did it himself as well. So this isn't exactly new practice, I guess, from the UFC. And it is the biggest fight in terms of the name value and all that. So I understand why it'll go. But maybe Pavlovich hit the jackpot here. Maybe, guys, he can be the first time, 2-time backup fighter for a heavyweight title fight. That could be his reward. He can step on the scale in November there. George?
If he did hit the jackpot, he'll probably wind up losing it, though. We've already seen what his gambling skills are like.
Exactly. That was great. I'm sure everyone has seen the clip of Sergei Pavlovich gambling at the slots just hours before. That was
how cool is that guy, man? Just chilling, gambling.
He is a nice personality. I'm liking what we're seeing from him so far.
Yeah.
Danny?
How do you even read the UFC, though, at this point? Right? Like, I think Mike, you had a great point here. He may end up being a backup twice. I mean, that's historic, right? Nobody has ever done that.
I don't believe so.
But so, you know, he was a backup, 6-fight winning streak, 6 first-round knockouts, and that can't get him. Covington is out for a year, not nearly in that streak. Backup, but because he was backup fighter, he gets the immediate title shot or whatever. So, like, I mean, this is such a difficult thing to navigate, right? Like, who gets what? What do you have to do to earn a title shot?
Absolutely. And JD Reality YouTube in the comments says, do you guys think Pavlovich will be the new boogeyman of the heavyweight division now that Francis Ngannou is gone? I think he already is. I mean, he was doing what he's doing. Even Francis Ngannou can put a streak like this together of the first round knockouts. But anyways, to close out this first round topic, or this topic one, I want to address Curtis Blaydes, who was on the other side of the coin here. Interesting situation for him, guys, right? Like, I know a lot of people sitting here Sunday, Monday, being critical of his game plan and all that stuff. Regardless, he lost this fight, and it's now becoming a little bit of a trend. He's lost 3 likely number 1 contender fights at this point. Lost to Francis Ngannou in their rematch, lost to Derek Lewis in a fight where he was knocked out brutally, and then now loses to Sergei Pavlovich in a fight that probably would have got him a title shot. All these having like similar stakes when he was on a winning streak and stuff. Danny, I'm curious, we'll go back to you. Do you think we're now seeing like the trend and the story of what Curtis Blaydes' career might be? The guy who can beat most of the division, but when he's in there fighting number 1, number 2, number 3, he can't get over the hump.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In fact, I already kind of had that feeling going into this fight, which is why my official pick on the MMA Junkie staff picks was Sergei Pavlovich. But if you sort of do a UFC video game type analysis and you just put them by stats, I mean, in my opinion, still to this day, Curtis Blaydes is the most skilled fighter. But there is something weird. I don't know if it's psychological or what, but when he does face a power puncher, he can't really bring out the skills that he brings out against other people. And that's exactly what we saw. I mean, clearly a stud wrestler, but for whatever reason, didn't really attempt to wrestle until he was hurt, which I'm sure is a lot more difficult than being in all your full senses. But yeah, I mean, you look at Curtis Blaydes. How old is he? He's been around for a very, very long time. It just seems he can't get over that. So I think he's going to be a top 5. He's still a very skilled guy, but at this point, after those type of performances, I don't know if he ever will break that sort of ceiling and then become a number 1 or even challenge for a title.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I know that Curtis Blaydes, he wants to be champion, right? He wants to be known as the best heavyweight in the world. And I know, he's had opportunities to leave the UFC. I'd heard, PFL came to him to something pretty strong when he was a brief free agent like years ago, and he probably took less money to stay in the UFC. So I understand why. And, at the very top, there is more money to be made in the UFC if you can get that belt and be headlining pay-per-views and stuff. But he's struggling to get to that point, George. I mean, do you think we have seen the fullness of Curtis Blaydes here? Like, is he not going to be able to beat these absolute top guys, or do you think there's still a path for him to figure this out?
I think there's a path for him to figure it out, because every time he has lost, he's put together a streak of at least 3 fights with some finishes, and he's gotten better. So he's only 32 years old. He doesn't seem to get too down after his losses, although we don't know him personally and how he reacts when he gets back home. We only know that when he comes back, he's tough, he wins, he's still a problem for a lot of fighters. He has to dial something in, though, at this high level, when he's title contender, number 1 contender, whatever you want to call him, he has to definitely, I think, just keep working on fighter IQ, maybe sports psychologist, and game planning. I don't know, because he's just coming up short, but he's not getting devastated to the point where he hasn't been able to answer the bell on the next set of fights that he has. Now, once I start seeing 2 or 3 fight losing streaks and he's getting crushed, then yes, that's when we start to turn the page a little bit. But to be fair, he's bounced back.
Yeah, I appreciate the level-headed response to that, I guess, then, too, because obviously, if you look at some of these fights, he has been winning. He was doing very well against Derek Lewis before he got caught with that insane uppercut. And in this fight, too, he had his moments. And I've heard some people say, I think Dean Thomas put it very well on the post-fight show from this event. Like, he was doing well, but he cracked Pavlovich with, I think, like a right hook. And then at that point, he just got maybe too excited and thought he could do it again and again. And then he ended up getting caught himself, and that was the fight.
Yeah.
But
Mike, I was watching it again, and he had a nice shell. He was respectful of Pavlovich. So he did swing wild a couple of times, but every time that he needed to cover up, he had proper cover up, probably from working with the ring for many years. He started to maybe establish some leg kicks a little bit to the calf. So he was starting to mix it up, but I still feel like, again, your bread and butter is wrestling. He's like the owner of a steakhouse. Give us the steak. You know what I mean? Stop serving the sides and everything else. And he just didn't get to that when I think he should have. And he had already established his hands. And I think once you get that other guy thinking, the striker thinking, conventional grappler versus striker, at some point, that's probably the time where you maybe do want to mix it up, unless your ego's so strong that you feel like, you know what, I'm just going to beat this guy at his best and take him out. However, you should learn from the last 2 times that you got checked in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Like, there's such a delicate balance at these heavyweights. You do well on the feet, and then you rush a takedown, you get knocked out like you did against Derek Lewis. And if you, go too aggressive on the takedowns, things can happen. So anyways, we'll see what happens with Curtis Blaydes, how he learns from this one. I consider him one of the smarter fighters out there, despite the criticism around this game plan. So we will see what happens next time out.